Good evening and welcome to Writers Unplugged. This is a series for a chance to hear your favorite writers or new to you writers in conversation as if you were eavesdropping on us in a coffee shop. My name is Jen Jumba. I'm a librarian at the main library of Cleveland Public Library. And one of my favorite things besides reading, I know, shock, is talking to writers. It's an opportunity to get to know their craft, what inspires their stories, where they like to write, essentially getting to know them better and seeing them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. And so we are so lucky this evening to have Wendell Thomas joining us this evening to talk about her latest in the Sid Redondo series, Cheap Thrills. But before we get started, I want to mention a few housekeeping notes to find out who else is visiting, both in person and live. Go to cpl.org/unplugged. And Max Backs Books on Coventry, which is our wonderful independent bookstore, has copies of Wendell's books for you. And if you have questions for Wendell, put them into the chat. I will be sure to ask them. So, brief introduction to Wendell Thomas. Wendell Thomas teaches in the Graduate Film School at UCLA, lectures internationally on screenwriting, and has worked as an entertainment reporter, development executive, script consultant, and film and television writer. Her first Sid Redondo novel, Lost Luggage, was nominated for the Lefty and Macavity Awards for Best Debut Mystery in 2017. And her second, Drowned Under, was nominated for an Anthony Award for Best Paperback Original Mystery of 2019. Her latest, which we'll talk about tonight, Cheap Thrills, was the Lefty Award winner for the Best Humorous Mystery of 2023. And those are just the awards for her books. As I mentioned, she has a career in the film industry, and it's humbling to read. She has worked in LA as a casting assistant, a director's assistant, a script reader, story editor, development executive, script consultant, screenwriter. And so she has worked on writing and developing projects for companies including Disney, Warner Brothers, Paramount, Universal, Showtime, PBS, A&E, NBC, to name a few. So I was very lucky. I was introduced to Wendell by a fellow writer, Stephen Mac Jones, who visited us last fall. Again, proof that the writing community is kind and generous, and they want to see one another succeed. So personally, I'm looking forward to catching up with Wendell, and after we're finished this evening, to talk about travel. So please join me in a warm welcome to Wendell Thomas.
Hey, Jen. Hey. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks again to Stephen for introducing us. He's just the best guy ever.
He is one of the best guys, and his wife as well. So I told them that I was live with you, so they should be tuning in. So first of all, cheers. Congratulations. This won a Lefty Award.
Thank you.
So can you, this just happened, a couple months ago. So can you tell us a little bit about Cheap Thrills?
Yeah, sure. It's the fourth book in the Sid Redondo series. And so in the first book, she's never been farther than New Jersey. So I always try to choose a exotic location. And the books are all set in 2006, 2007. And so I actually was trying to figure out where she would go next. And I realized that Eat, Pray, Love had come out in 2006 in the paperback in 2007. And I just thought, what a horror show for a travel agent. Every woman in the world wanting to go. And so I started doing research, and then I found out that there was a lot of endangered birds in Indonesia and particularly in Bali. And so I decided to set it there. So the setup is that Sid's mom, who has very much just been around for her whole life and stayed in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, where they live, sneaks away and books a trip to Bali, and Eat, Pray, Love trip to Bali through Sid's rival travel agent. And then, of course, her trip goes disastrously. So the book is about Sid going to kind of save her mother, but also winds up in the midst of this huge kind of smuggling situation with Bali starlings. So it's it's screwball, but it's got an underlying message, I guess, in terms of, taking care of the animals that still are around.
Absolutely. I was struck by that. I mean, your novels are laugh out loud funny. I mean, there are moments where it doesn't matter where I'm reading. If I'm by myself, I'm like, oh my God, I'm laughing out loud by myself. Depending on where I'm reading it, people are like looking at me like, what's happening? I was like, oh no, you have to read this book in this series because it's just so much fun. And in addition to the hijinks, you are right. There's a couple underlying themes that come across in each of the books. Number one is Sid's value of family comes across in each one of these books. There's 4 now in the series, so binge read, everybody. And then the second thing that comes across is there's always an animal connection. So can you talk a little bit about how important it is for you to kind of highlight things that are exotic and that are threatened?
Yeah, when I first started this series, I was just trying to figure out what the crime would be. You know, I wanted a Romancing the Stone feel to it, but obviously it can be Jewels. So I was like, and I looked up East Africa and then saw unbelievable poaching and smuggling and trafficking. And so I went to, actually went to Scotland Yard's wildlife crime prevention team, and they were willing to talk to me, and they were happy I was writing a beach book, which was very bizarre because I was embarrassed. I'm like, I'm not doing like anything. I'm not David Attenborough-esque, you know, at all. And I went to see, and they had a room. They said, you have to come down. And I was like, really? And they had a room with all the things that have been confiscated at Heathrow over like the last 50. It's the most terrifying room in the world. And so I really, it went in, you know, and I've read a couple of books. There's a couple of great books. There's The Lizard King by Brian Christie, and there's other books that are around about smuggling. And I think most people just don't realize how much of it's going on. I think people maybe now know about the python situation in the Everglades where, you know, were brought over, but there's so many species that are just on the edge of completely disappearing. And it's not just rhinos and pandas. And, you know, so I've tried to kind of focus on slightly more obscure ones just to bring them forward a little bit. But it's really important to me. And I think it's, there's so many people out there fighting for these animals that are just heroes to me, and nobody knows about them.
Absolutely. So I'm joined in conversation with award-winning writer Wendell Thomas. This is the 4th in her series, Cheap Trills. So talking a little bit about animals and finding the obscure ones, I had to look up what a Bali starling looked like, and was just like absolutely amazed with how beautiful it was, and in 2 colors essentially, right? But just the way the feathers were and the style and the moxie, I'm like, oh my God, that's like if Sid were a bird, right? That would be Sid with, you know, the kind of flash, you know, that draws attention. And they're not very big. That was the other thing. I mean, they're little.
They are tiny. There's for any of your people, this is one of my totems that's on my desk. But yeah, they're white with this little like Lone Ranger blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're incredible.
They're stunning. So we're going to go a little bit backwards, right? Because your career has been in screenwriting. And I will tell you that for the past 2 weeks and going to my 3rd week, I can say that I work at the Metropolis Public Library because they have been filming right outside the street that the library's on, the latest movie of Superman. So having the ability to see how everything is set up and created, and how it takes almost a week to do so, to get everything positioned just right, and all the storefronts are transformed, and it gave me a whole new appreciation to something that we'll see for maybe 20 seconds on the screen, but how long it takes to set up. And I'm thinking that's your wheelhouse, you know, in terms of creating a story and then all the things that make that story accessible on the screen. So
yeah, it's I think people have no idea. People want to go to a movie set. They're a little burst of happiness, and then it's just the most boring place in the world. Because you know, 90% of it is just waiting for everything to get ready. And and it's really interesting, but there's so many moving parts. And I think that in a screenplay, you have to consider all of those. I mean, I always tell my students, like, is this scene worth 100 people showing up?
Ooh.
It's like 100 people have to show up. The caterers have to show up, and the Teamsters with the transportation and the electricians. And so it's like 100 people almost always. And is it worth it? Is that scene worth making all those people do that?
I never thought about it that way. And I don't think, you know, people listening, it gives us a whole new appreciation. So I know things end up on the cutting room floor. But for sure, to frame it in that perspective, because I was amazed, like the amount of cords that were running, you know, alongside the street, and, you know, the security that's keeping people from walking on the set, and, you know, filming it backwards, like they had positioned all the concrete. Apparently something exploded and there was damage and car crashes, but they filmed it backwards. Like they did all that first and then they went to the scenes that led up to that. So I'm like, even to think that way, which is completely different. You know, we don't read a book backwards. I mean, I know there's some people who probably read the last chapter first, not one of them.
Crystal, right? But yeah, it's really interesting because that's the other thing, is that I've never known a film that was shot in order. So that's the other thing for the actors. You really come to appreciate the work that actors do, because it's not like, you know, Meryl Streep starts here and goes to here in her performance. Right. You may have to start here and then go back to here and then go here and then go there. And it's just, it's never in order. So actors are astounding to me, their ability to kind of jump into wherever they are in their character arc at any moment and just deliver that. It's amazing, really.
It is amazing. So I'm joined by award-winning writer Wendell Thomas. This is Cheap Trills in the latest in the Sid Redondo series. So yeah, I mean, when you write a book, do you write it in order, or are you somebody who sees scenes, writes scenes, and then figures out how to put them all together?
I'm kind of, in general, I'm a pantser.
Okay.
But
you just made Mike laugh.
But because I was a screenwriter, I think I always start with a couple of anchors in mind, certain structural anchors or scenes that I know or something I want to get to. Like there's not really a spoiler alert, but I knew when I started writing Drowned Under, and it was a cruise ship thing, that I knew that Sid had to fall off the cruise ship. Like I knew that was going to happen. I didn't know where, but I knew it had to happen. Right. And so there's certain things like that I'm trying to maybe get to, but mostly I kind of go from this place to this place, but I don't know what's happening in between. Okay. And so, and I always, and this is the most embarrassing thing to admit, and it just happened to me last week again, I the last 10 pages of every book the day they were due. And I don't know why I can't do it till then. I don't know what. And I did it with a short story. I changed the killer on a Friday night. It was due on Saturday. I did this like last week. I don't know what is wrong with this. Something's deeply wrong.
No. Okay. Like, well, let's rephrase in terms of deeply wrong. You have 4 published novels, not to mention all of your short fiction and short stories. But I would say, like, stick with it. It is working for you.
It's pretty stressful for my husband.
Yeah, well, I can imagine, but better to be under stress for like a shorter period of time than a longer period of time. So long as you know, like the 24 hours leading up to a due date is going to be crazy.
Yeah, it is. But it's really funny. But I guess, you know, I do have a real belief that your subconscious is working on stuff all the time. And so it's, you know, somewhere I knew what I needed to write, but for whatever reason, I need that final push to like get the ending.
Yeah. It's just part of your process. Yeah. I wouldn't argue with it at all. I think it's terrific. So, you know, how do you do your research? I mean, this is the interesting thing. You saw a story about endangered species in East Africa, and you go to Scotland Yard to research Bali. So, I mean, how does that call go? Like, hi, I'm Wendell Thomas. And they're like, hello, Scotland Yard. How does that?
Well, it was really funny. So when I first started doing the first thing I always do is read, right? Mm-hmm. And I also, the other thing that started the whole series is I got it. There were a couple of articles. There's been a lot lately, but there were a couple of articles of like a guy caught at LAX with like, you know, a monkey down his pants and stuff like that. And I'm like, there's something hilarious about that.
And disturbing, but yes.
Disturbing, but hilarious.
But very hilarious. Yeah, I agree.
So I read a lot, but then I was doing research for another project and I was in London. And I just saw, somebody had referenced the wildlife crime, and I just thought, what the hell, I'll just call Scotland Yard. I called their PR department. That's always the best way, I think, to get in touch with police and just say, look, this is what I'm doing. Is there anyone there? Who's the person I should ask to talk to? Can you put me in touch with them? Should I contact them directly? And I was in the British Library doing research, and I got a call back from this guy, Sergeant Ian Knox, and that's when he said, you got to come down. And so I
Wow.
got, I put all my books back and got in the tube and like went to this is kind of near the Oval, their office, and did that. And then he put me in touch with people who work for traffic. And he put me in touch with a guy he knew at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then you start to kind of find people. And so for Bali, especially, I found two incredible people. And one, I just started reading articles on the Bali starling and on bird trading and all of that. And tons of them were written by the same guy. And I have a friend at The Revelator. It's an environmental magazine. I don't know if you've ever seen it online, but they've reviewed Drowned Under. And I became friends with Ken Platt, who is the editor. And I said, do you know this guy, Chris Shepard? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you think he would talk to me? So he put me in touch with him. Yes. And Chris ran Traffic Southeast Asia for 20 years. And he's actually the character that Stu Capistranis is based on. Like, who does, Chris did. And I love him. And then
that's a great character.
He in real life is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then I called the LA Zoo. I found an article in the LA Zoo about someone who'd gone to Bali to work at a starling rescue. And I got in touch. I actually found her on Facebook. Because the zoo wouldn't put me in touch with her. So I just instant messaged her on Facebook. And Lori Rogalski has helped me so much. So you have to be a little bit pushy, but I'm not a pushy person by nature. So if they had either of them had said no, I would have never tried again.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just kind of, it's really, there's a community of the kind of environmental people who are working in animal rescue or animal preservation or whatever. So, and they know each other. So if you can just get a tiny foot in the door, then they're very willing to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, experience anyway.
That's what, you're so great. I think anybody would help you. So I'm joined in conversation with award winner Wendell Thomas. This is the latest, Cheap Trills. So, talking about like all the people that you kind of network and get to know, I mean, that's pretty darn incredible. And I'm sure, like most people, we like talking about what we do. And so I'm sure they had gazillions of stories to tell. And I can't imagine what that room at Heathrow looked like.
It was quite shocking. I mean, it made me cry, really, because it's just, there's all these pangolin scales and it had every kind of like medicine, and there was a polar bear skin, and it's just this huge thing. And you know that all of these animals have died for nothing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because that's the thing. There's so many medicines that things are, that's the whole pangolin thing. And it's also the rhino horn is supposed to be a medicine, but it's not real. Right. You know what I mean? So they really die for nothing, which is just so tragic to me. People had stories. I mean, Chris Shepard said that once he worked for a zoo in Indonesia when he was just starting out in this stuff, and he actually had to transport a red kangaroo in a taxi. I mean, he has important stories about he has the stories of the world, and there's and he's done unbelievable stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, they all have stories. A lot of them are heartbreaking, and kind of the funniest person, not the funniest, but the kind of most interesting person that I've encountered was for Drowned Under. There's a guy, Neil Waters, who is the head of the Thylacine Awareness Group of Australia. And he really believes there's still Tasmanian tigers in the world. And he has this whole organization of people out there trying to take pictures. And my husband and I actually sponsor a Thylacine cam in Tasmania, but nothing but wombats. We've never seen anything but wombats. But he said
not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Not yet. So there's so many interesting people working in that space.
Yeah.
And they do all have stories, a lot of heartbreaking stories, but also funny stories. Of people who just there is an incredible story. So someone was carrying cobra eggs in their pants. And
as one does,
like a ton, like 100 and they got confiscated. And the airport staff put them in this cage, and then the eggs all hatched and they all escaped.
Oh,
While we're in the airport, but they didn't tell anyone. So they were just trying to catch them without anyone knowing. I mean, that's one of the stories that Chris told me.
oh, I can't imagine. So the next time I see somebody scurrying through the airport, I may wonder, are you just late for your flight, or is there something loose that's not supposed to be?
I know. It's just, it really is kind of extraordinary, some of the things that happen when people are trying to smuggle, especially if they're not very smart.
Right. And that's a great thing about this book, is that I think it you said a lesson, but it informs us of something that's happening in the world that we should be aware of, but it's not something that's like kind of beating us over the head, which I think, you're stressing the importance of it. You're doing it in a way that's a little more entertaining. In a good way.
I just believe in the spoonful of sugar approach.
Absolutely.
Because I feel when I talk to the wildlife crime people initially, they said that the docs, all that stuff is great. Everybody that watches Nova is great, but all of that stuff, you're kind of preaching to the converted.
Right.
Right. So I wanted to see if I could get to the a beach read. So somebody who's got some Aramis, like crocodile purse that's made from, that's illegally made, would maybe think next time. Right. So that's what I want, is that people who don't normally think about it, and they don't realize that they shouldn't have tortoiseshell combs, or they don't realize that they should, that kind of stuff, just one more second of thinking.
Absolutely. I recently went at the beginning of the year to Thailand and Cambodia, and part of the trip was going to an elephant sanctuary up in the mountains in Chiang Rai in Thailand. And you see that it's illegal for elephants to work anymore, right? Yeah. At least in Thailand. But when you read the story of the 4 that are in this sanctuary, same thing, like heartbroken. And then you're seeing them up close, and you're, feeding them the sugar cane, after they've had lunch and before they go for, their nap or whatever. And it's that powerful connection you have that's unlike, seeing like something on Nova. Like, no, I actually fed to this elephant. And so it makes a profound difference in terms of awareness, and then making sure, like, I guess the famous expression, better, do better.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I mean, there's really no excuse.
Yeah. And the same with tourism, in a sense, because it's a travel agent. She just being more aware of your environment when you're around, because, and trying to leave places the way that you found them.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit more about Sid and where the origin of this character came from? Because she's unlike anything I've ever read, and have been so amused and inspired by her at the same time. So,
well, that's very kind of you. It's a strange story, and I've told this story before, but I was teaching in the UK, and I was in like a hotel in Scotland, and I just saw this woman, and she was in a mini skirt and high heels, and she had bracelets that went like from here to here, like flea market bracelets.
Okay.
And she's standing there, and some guy comes out of the jungle with a machete, and she just goes whack. And honestly, I just I saw that in my brain, and there she was, and I'm like, who is this? You know what I mean? And then I started thinking about it, and I wrote it as a script first. Okay. So she was, I wanted to do Romancing the Stone. So it was really a romantic comedy adventure first.
Absolutely.
And so then, you just try to figure out. And then I was like, well, Joan Wilder was a novelist. I can't do that. Like, what job could she have that would take her on adventures? And I was like, travel agent. But if she's a good travel agent, I mean, if she's been everywhere, then she's not a fish out of water. So I really wanted someone who would be a fish out of water in every book. Yeah. If that makes sense. So that way she knows everything about her business. She's incredibly professional. She's really smart about travel, but she, it's all theoretical knowledge. So I want to drop her somewhere where that bounces up against what's actually happening.
Practical.
That's where comedy comes for me always. Yeah. Right. So, so then, and the whole like mid-range fashion stuff.
The fashion. Yeah.
I mean, I went to Bay Ridge. I decided I wanted to be from East Coast, and I went to Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and I cannot tell you how lovely everybody was to me there. And I just thought, and everybody knows everybody. I went into the bookstore, and they were telling me like they can't go anywhere. It takes 40 minutes to mail a letter because they run into 25 people they've known since they were 2. Like
Yes.
there's no, and I wanted her to be stuck in that. So she wanted to get out, but she also loves everyone there. Like that kind of combination.
The tension. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And there was a place in Bay Ridge, it's called 21st Century. And it's like it's kind of like Loman's or something, you know, and it's all this fashion. And it stuck in my brain. And then for some reason, I was just like, she's always trying to get stuff on special, you know, and she wants the 85% off, the 50% off, the whatever, you know. That's
exactly. I think that's the best part. And all of us, you know, women who are listening and watching will tell you that nobody compliments you on the things that you paid full price for. No one ever. They'll be like, I like that. And it's like, oh yeah, I found it in the bottom of this. And then I had a coupon in this. And I think it was like $3. Yeah. Nobody says anything about the stuff that you were like, oh my God, I got the last one. Right. So
I wanted her to be somebody who's a bargain hunter and someone who barters. Like I thought that would be funny. So I like that she barters in town. Like she barters, you know, gives trips for, you know, last minute vaccinations, or she does, you know what I mean? I wanted her to be that kind of person.
Yeah. Yeah. So in discussion, the conversation with Wendell Thomas, award-winning writer. This is the latest in the Sid series, Cheap Trills. So we're just talking about all things Sid right now. I mean, there are descriptions in the book about how she was able to do something. Kickboxing in stilettos for balance and speed. Only Sid. Like not me. I mean, I don't even think I could walk, let alone like do balance, speed, or kickboxing in stilettos. So
I think the thing about her, and again, I can't. I mean, I fall over. I literally wore them when I was teaching, when I first started out, and I just fell down steps like weekly.
Yeah.
But the thing about her is she's tiny, and if you haven't read the books, she is the youngest cousin and the only girl in a family of like 10 boys. So she totally over surveilled and overprotected and teased for her entire life. And she's tiny, she's like 5'2". And so she, from as soon as she could get, her mom would let her wear heels. She's worn heels just to be, you know, a little bit taller and to be able to kick her butt and, you know, in the balls if she needs to. So that's why that came out. But because she wears them all the time, she's actually more stable in that situation. And she also thinks, you know, if
it's too late for me, but okay. She started young.
You're in a self-defense situation and you're in heels. You got to know how to kick somebody in your heels, right?
It makes perfect sense. It becomes a weapon.
Yeah. So that's her thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not mine. I would just fall over. I couldn't punch anything.
I probably couldn't chew gum and wear them at the same time. So, or read a book and wear them at the same time. Yeah.
I have a large collection of flats. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. As we get older, we sometimes get wiser. So as we see Sid age in the series, perhaps she'll resort to flats.
She has some kitten heels. So already.
Yeah, exactly. So can we talk a little bit about the fact that your books are set in 2006, 2007, like how you approach writing and keep technology that we have today from entering those books?
Yeah, it was, I mean, I initially set them in the present, and when I was working on them and the like Muslim ban came in, and I was like, I don't want to be writing these books right now. I don't want that to be part of what's happening for her. So, and I also wanted her to be, not quite a millennial. Do you know what I mean? Like a little older than that. So I picked 2006, and just because there were interesting things going on then, and it was also pre the iPhone.
Yes,
that'll be coming in June of 2007. So she's gonna probably get one soon. But it was she has the first camera phone and all of that kind of stuff. But there was really not Google. There were not a lot of things that were happening as much then. So I kind of love that. And then, like I said, when it fell in with the Eat, Pray, Love, then that was perfect.
Yes.
And it also gives me room. I think I really took to heart kind of what Michael Connelly says about how Bosch is aged out and how Sue Graft and Cap Kinsey within like a 3 or 4 year period. So I really decided I wanted to keep Sid. You know, I wanted to have a book that was set almost every other month or something like that. So I can keep her, I don't age her out too soon.
Yeah. No, I think it's terrific. It's really kind of fun to see her adventures and how she evolves. And then I think the only word I can think of right now is grittiness that she has to be able to solve things. I mean, I can remember studying abroad, and you go and your parents are like, okay, see ya, here's a calling card, and you're like, okay. So I got lost a couple times, trying to navigate a map, and got off on the wrong tube stop. And, it's just part of it. And now, people have smartphones. And so like a lot of those happy accidents where you get lost and you meet wonderful people or discover a great, local restaurant or something like that when you're traveling, is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So there's something very cool that, her ability to think through things and escape things. And I marvel at it. So yeah, and I won't give anything away, but I will just say, like an Hermes scarf, I was like, wow, of course Sid does that, and thinks through something like that. So, and she has no fear.
Yeah, I think again, that's partly coming from it's coming from growing up with all those boys.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? She's had to fight back. So she knows she's pretty tough, but she is afraid, like she's afraid of letting her family down. Like
right.
Her fears are more emotional than they are, because I think she's very responsible, and she's also impulsive. So for me, that was the way that I could make her funny. Do you know what I mean? Because she was always doing something that she probably shouldn't have done, and then realizing it and then trying to undo. So for me, that's a kind of Lucy Ricardo thing.
Absolutely.
In a way.
Yeah, there's a physical comedy that comes across on the page, right? That only, so many people can pull that off well, right? I think of Lucille Ball, I think, I mean, those are the people that you think. Sandra Bullock, I think, can do it pretty well. The physical comedy and Miss Congeniality.
Yeah.
So that's how Sid comes across. And so, like, while you're writing her, are you laughing as well? Or do you laugh while you get the idea and then have to?
I think I'm amused by the idea, and then I have to see if it works. I have, because like I said, I can see, like, as soon as I saw the hotel there's a hotel in Cheap Thrills where she goes to stay, and I based it on a real hotel. It's called the Hanging Gardens. And as soon as I saw a funicular railway in this hotel, like, I have to do a chase on the funicular railway. And I knew that it would be funny, but I didn't know if I could pull it off. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of, I think that's the hardest thing about the books for me, and much harder than screenwriting, is to write the physical comedy sequences, because writing them in prose is really hard to get the rhythm and let everybody see everything, and also keep them funny. Like that takes, like, the helicopter landing in Drowned Under, and I think the leopard net and stuff in Lost Luggage. There's certain ones that it took me a long time to get them right. Like I probably work on those the hardest, is those sequences, because if you write a script, you have white spaces on the page and you can use those for rhythm, and you don't have to give as much description. But in the book, you've got to make sure everybody's seeing everything and that the jokes come in at the right time, so that is probably the hardest part.
Yeah. Well, I think you did
it, but it's hard.
Yeah, I think you did an outstanding job. So, I'm joined with award-winning writer Wendell Thomas of Cheap Thrills, and just talking about, like, a beloved character, Sid Redondo, and even how she answers the phone. I mean, she never just says, "This is Sid." It's like Sid Redondo Travel, like, always out there making sure that people know who she is and what she does, and it's terrific to see. And in this book in particular, seeing the dynamic between her and her mom was something that I really enjoyed reading about, and that special bond between the two of them, and both of them kind of leaving where they were and then finding a way together. So
good. I'm glad. Because it's funny. I didn't realize that the book was kind of about motherhood until I finished it. Because Sid's trying to keep these. She's got 3 Bali starlings in her purse, and she's trying to keep them alive. And then but her mom is trying to, like, let her go. Her mom actually wants to get rid of her a little bit, so she can have a real vacation. So it's a lot about, I think, virtual and metaphorical parenthood or motherhood of some kind. And her dad, if people haven't read the books, her dad died when she was 4. And then her uncle and all the Redondos took them in. And so she and her mom have kind of been the protected ones, but also kind of stuck, in this family.
Yeah. My parents are amazing, and they told my sister and I that they raised us with roots and wings, wings so we could fly on our own, but roots so that we always knew we had a place to come back to.
That's so
So it reminded me a lot as I was reading this book, the dynamic between the two of them. And my mom and I traveled to Peru just before the pandemic and the world changed. Yeah. She climbed to the top of Machu Picchu with me. So special. I mean, so like, it's just neat to see, as I was reading this, I was thinking like, look, Sid and her mom are enjoying this experience, parts of it, we'll say, in Bali, which is this absolutely like gorgeous paradise. So did you go there at all to research? I think like that you'd have to probably factor that in, maybe.
Well, you do have to factor it in. So, but because of the pandemic, I couldn't go to Bali. But I hesitated, but I have 3 friends who've lived there.
Okay.
Who actually live there. So they know what it smells and they know what it's really like. And so all sorts of details I got from them, like, for example, that people are on the side of the road with vodka bottles full of gasoline. Like that was one of my friends, those kind of things. So they could really help me with that. I'm so like the one great thing for me, because I have such about the progress of technology, but the number of vlogs that are out there of people who've gone to Bali is unbelievable. And so I was able to see tons of stuff and people talking about it, and a million people going in the monkey forest and being attacked, and like a million, all of that. So that was great. But the best thing for me, I think that made it possible to feel like maybe I had been to Bali when I was writing it, was I found this woman, Jan Montika, and she was a travel agent in Bali for 50 years. 50
wow.
And she went there. She was originally from New Zealand. She married a Balinese man. She went with him and they set up a travel agency in 1969, and it went until 2019. So she wrote a memoir. And I read about her memoir in one other book I was reading on Bali. And then I tried to track her down, and she actually, again, I messaged her on Facebook, and she let me know. And then I had to get a copy of her memoir. I had to get it from a used bookstore in New Zealand, I guess, to find out what the stories. Yeah. But she is kind of Sid. She has red hair. So when she landed in Bali, they thought she was a demon, and she also wore heels that sunk into the tarmac. So she had all sorts of stuff that she told me.
And I think that's the thing, reading your books, that you feel that you're right there with Sid, that you capture that. I mean, it's those little details. So I'm like, you had to have gone to Bali, but you have friends that live there, but it rings authentic. I mean, the sights, the sounds, the smells. And I will tell you, having been in Thailand, I have had durian and I've had mangosteen. Durian, are signs everywhere in the hotel with the durian and like the red circle with the line through it, because the ventilation systems are so it smells horrible. I mean, what would make somebody even think, this smells horrible? How about I try and see if I can eat it? But it's actually pretty darn good if you can get past the smell, because it tastes nothing like what it smells like.
I know. And stuff like that. Like I went to a frangipani like grove that someone has near LA, because I wanted to smell that, you know what I mean? So I did, and I bought some durian, and I did do all that stuff as much as I could do from here.
Absolutely. What it comes across in the novel, because I'm like, yep, been there. I remember when like our guide was like, here, this, and everybody was like, I think it was like day 1, and we had spent like the whole day before like traveling from everywhere across the United States to Bangkok. And okay, so on top of being like jet lagged, hey, let's try some durian. but still, it was good. And the mangosteen is so pretty. Yeah. And it tastes good too. But like, just, you did that. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's like, I know what that is now, and then there's a phrase that you use in this book. So I'm joined in conversation this evening with award-winning writer Wendell Thomas. This is Cheap Trills, the latest in the Sid Redondo series. But there is a phrase that you use called Jam Karat. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that was something else that just stuck out to me when reading this book.
It's elastic time. It just means elastic time. And so that just means that in Bali, time isn't treated in the same way that it is in the United States, and that when you're there, if you don't lean into that, and then you're just going to be irritated all the time. Yeah. And so I love that. But also there's actually, I think the first time I ever heard that phrase, honest to God, Jen, was in a Vonda Shepard song. I think Vonda Shepard has a song called Jam Karat. And so then when I picked it up, when I was reading about Bali, I was like, yeah, I remember that. And that makes so much sense, because I think too, Sid is so organized on some level that for her to kind of like let things go a little bit it's not her natural state.
Certainly not. I don't think it's most Westerners' state, because as a travel agent, everything is about timing and arrivals and departures and reservations. And then they have a whole different calendar. So Sid's was booked in Bali by her nemesis, right? Her rival, chief competition, whatever, Peg. So there's that. But they have a different calendar. So, that also speaks to that.
Yeah, I didn't know that at all. That was the two most amazing things I found out about Bali, that just, I was like, I knew I had to write a book about it. Yeah. But the first thing was that there are 3 calendars, and only one of them is the Western calendar. So that's amazing to me. And, and the regular calendar, the one that most of them go by, is 210 days, which who ever knew that?
Not until reading this book. Yeah.
But the other amazing thing is this idea that you can, and that 210 days that year, that you're not supposed to put a baby on the ground.
Yes, that was the other.
It was like amazing to me. And I was like, Sid is going to be, I can just see that she's not going to know this. And that's the situation.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating culture. It's incredible. And the history of it. And so I read all these wonderful books on Bali that I love. And there's tons of really cool ones.
Do you have a favorite one that we should add to the top of our reading list?
Yeah, it's even though it was written in the 30s, it's still supposed to be the best on the culture. It's called The Island Bali by Miguel Cora. I always pronounce his name improperly, but Covarrubias. And it's a really incredible book, and it has history, and it's drawings of what the houses look like and dances. It's just it's incredible. It's an incredible book.
Absolutely.
I love it. And I also, the most fun thing for me to do, because I'm doing stuff not in present day, is to go find like the photos for 2006 for Bali. And, hopefully, and I found some, the Baedekers for 2006 for Bali and stuff like that. So it's really fun to go back and look at those guides that are just a little bit out of date.
Yes.
And so that was really, because I had to make sure that nothing in the books everything in the books was
in its current existence, I guess. Yeah.
Right. So there were a lot of things that I had to be careful about, but that's really fun too, as well.
Yeah. And I have to say, plugging, Sid's mom and who she travels with happens to be Sid's childhood librarian. So I think that's pretty fun too, that librarians can end up in books.
No, I know. Actually, that Bea North is a real librarian with the Anaheim Public Library Foundation.
Awesome.
And she gave a donation to have her name in the book, but I was like, no, I'm putting you in. I was like, because I love it.
That's terrific.
I know, because I love libraries and librarians. I just can't even. And so so I thought that's so great that she would be friends with her mom, and that, so I was thrilled, because she thought her name was just going to be in, and then she like saves the day.
Which is absolutely, to me, I was like, oh my gosh, we're more than just like the cardigan wearing, which I don't wear cardigans, and I don't have cats because of an allergy. So like not kind of fitting the stereotype per se. But it's quite fun. And of course, seeing you reference like 2 of my favorite books growing up, the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankenweiler and Harriet the Spy. Like from a young age, I have always loved, mysteries, and always been something about it. Yeah. And it's just funny. Like you would think, like fast forward, like now, because this was a career change. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm a librarian. I get to talk about books, and I get to talk to the people that write the books that I read, which is super fun. It's absolutely an amazing thing.
if I had been smarter, I would have become a librarian, because I thought that every time I went to the British Library, I was like, I wish I had worked here my whole life. Do you know what I mean? Like, it has this thing for me. That's why I put it in Fogged Off, because the British Library to me is just like,
absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for that. I work in a library that is almost 100 years old. It turns 100 next year. And, things like when it was first built, books were made of paper. They didn't have sprinkler systems. So there was no wood used in the construction of that library. So if something were to break out, it would be essentially contained. So plaster, stonework, marble, all of that. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And so the ceilings look like wood. It's actually plaster painted to look like wood with these elaborate designs. And you just kind of marvel.
Yeah.
I walk through there and people come through and their jaw drops every single time, and I never tire of it. There's just something very cool.
I have to come see it in person, but I feel the same way. And, there was that horrible fire. Well, in LA at the Central Library, which I love the Central Library. I work there all the time. And and Susan Orlean wrote that great book.
She wrote that amazing, yeah. I would say memoir of that library. Yeah.
But I just love libraries, and and that was probably the most excited I've been of anything of being an author, seeing my books on the shelf in the Central Library. Like that, for me, I can't even tell you, to see like Lost Luggage and Drowned Under when I first, started, and to see them on the shelf in the mystery section, I couldn't even.
Oh, I'm gonna have to send you pictures from my library with your book on my shelves. I have to imagine as a writer, it's special. Like you walk into a bookstore and you see it, or like you're, traveling, in an airport and there's somebody sitting there reading your book. I like Kindles, but because I can pack more on a Kindle but there's nothing better than reading that book, and then the conversations that emerge from there with people that are around you. So
yeah, it's real. And so books and libraries, I hope they go on forever. It's been such a hard couple of years for everybody that loves books, I think. But so Fogged Off is really a love letter to museums and libraries from me, because I just think they're so incredibly valuable and maybe not appreciated nearly as much as they should be.
Well, thank you. And, as librarians, I think there's this cool relationship with writers, because without you, I wouldn't have things to talk about, right? Or books to recommend to just that right person. So this symbiotic relationship that exists. So the fact that you're joining me here this evening, I think this is why it's so incredibly special. I can't do my work without people writing stuff, I say stuff, books, novels, to enter, find just the right customer when they walk in and what they're looking for. It's kind of special. And then when I can say, like, I've met them and they're like really good people too. It's fun.
Yeah. So, I think, none of us could survive without librarians, certainly as novelists, like forget it, because librarians and booksellers, like we couldn't work without
and then all the research. So Cleveland Public is a bit unique. It's a public library and a research library. So there's like various departments. So we have stuff that it's in my department as the popular department, which is basically books that are 2 years and younger. And then they go, like, cookbooks will go to science and technology, and literature, fiction will go upstairs to literature. But I'm also responsible for microfilm and microfiche.
So that's my favorite too. I can't even.
Oh, it is like the greatest thing. Like, they're not indexed. So like as librarians, we like an index to be able to search and Boolean search. But oh my gosh, some of the stuff that you see as you're scrolling through the microfilm to find what a customer is looking for is mind-boggling. I can remember looking for something for somebody, and this is like, these are what the library that they're proposing to put in New York City, like, on that on the main drag, and this is what we think we're going to put lions out front. And it was like this spec drawing, and I was like, oh my goodness, like that's the cool stuff.
It is so cool. I know I do. Yeah. I have a one period thing that I've been working on for about 20 years, but I went to the Colin Ward Library, the British Library newspaper library, and did the microfiche forever, like for weeks on end. And all around 1901 is when it's set. And so all of that stuff and the Illustrated Police News and like all of that, I just,
absolutely.
It's the best.
Yeah. And I didn't appreciate it like when I was in high school and would have to use it. You know, you go with like the roll of quarters or roll of dimes, you know, so that you can print each page and then you're like, I'll look at it later and then we'll like head out into the city because we're like cool high school kids. But yeah, I mean it's really interesting to watch you all as writers and your research process, you know, and how diligent and thoughtful.
It's just hard sometimes. Sometimes you just don't want, it's hard to write the book. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, because you just don't want to stop doing the research.
Yeah.
And like right now, I have a new series I'm thinking about that
Yeah.
is about John Singer Sargent and Henry James as amateurs. I want to call it the Lit and Sit mysteries. And so I'm doing all this reading about, I know about a lot about James because I studied him as my, he was one of my focuses early, but Sargent, I'm just reading all this stuff and looking at all his paintings and they're all around my room right now. And it's really, I love that part of it so much, but then you just have to go, oh, well, at some point you have to stop.
Yeah. At some point. But I mean, I think it's neat too. Like just hearing you say that you have pictures surrounding you right now. So like you're kind of infused and embedded in the environment in which you're writing, I think is special too.
Yeah.
You know, and I know when I, you know, have been reading your books, you know, I've looked up certain things to see where they are in the starling and this part. And it's fun to see. You know, I think you do a great job bringing it to life on the page as well. So
much.
Absolutely. Gosh, this time is just flying by. I get to talk to you for the whole rest of the evening. Not sure everybody would stay and listen. So I am joined, just one more, as award-winning writer, lefty, humorous novel, Wendell Thomas. This is Cheap Trills. This is the 4th. So if you all are new to Sid, you have some catching up to do, and you will not be disappointed for sure. Final 5 questions?
Sure.
Please. Okay. So in Bali, Sid acknowledges the local customs, right? And leaves offerings as a thanks. What would you leave as an offering?
In Bali?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that I would want to have something that had to do with the frangipanis because I love them and some of the betel nuts. So I think I would try. I think they're so beautiful the way they make them. I'm sure mine would be hideously ugly. No. But I would want to try to make the kind that they make because I think that they belong there. Like yes. You know what I mean? And I would want to put something there that belong there. I wouldn't necessarily make it about me. I would want it to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. A very typical Wendell gesture, thoughtful and intentional. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about this, but the second question is, what is your favorite Tupperware piece? Because Tupperware stars in this latest book, Cheap Trills.
Yes, it does. Well, I have to say, even though I don't own one, the idea that there's a Tupperware wok is just like blows my mind, and I love it so much. And so I'm on the hunt for because they're only sold in Indonesia, so I have to try to get one. But yeah, that is. But I have.
You aspire to, yes.
I aspire to the wok, but I have. I think in my house, my very favorite one might actually be, and Sid uses one of these. It's a pink, flat, almost sheet cake size Tupperware, so that when you can put things on top of it in the fridge as opposed to the round ones. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so that's probably the one. That's probably my favorite and most useful in the house.
It is the most useful because you can stack things on top of that, which is
I love that. I do use little Tupperwares and little things for travel for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Where would you most like to travel with Sid as your guide?
I want Macau.
Ooh.
I want to go to Macau, and Sid would be fun in Macau.
Absolutely.
But I think I need to go there before I can write about her there. But that's on my list for us.
Okay, perfect. If you need a librarian for some, research along the way, I'm happy. I'll call dibs. Sorry, B. Carry-on or checked luggage?
Oh, I haven't checked a bag in. I mean, I think once when I did a lot of work in Australia for a long time, and once or twice I would check a bag coming back with stuff I bought there. You know what I mean? But I haven't checked a bag going out of the country or out of LA in 24 years.
Wow.
I just won't do it.
It's impressive. After reading some of Sid's books, Sid's books, your books with Sid in them. Yeah, I am kind of suspect about ever wanting to check luggage ever again.
Because I went to all the stuff about Qantas's like weight limit is totally true. And I have like 3 different weighers because they're totally brutal about it. And you really can't. And so I got the very lightest luggage you can get is a certain kind of lipo, which I saved for because it weighs the least. So I do all that stuff.
No.
Mohair weighs nothing. Silk doesn't weigh very much. All the lightest warm stuff. Yeah, I figured it all out.
That's impressive because when I went on this trip, I was like a solo traveler with a small group. So we were like 20 strangers, picked a tour in, Thailand. And somebody who did just that was very particular. They would only do carry-on and stuff that washed and stuff that was light and packed. And I was like, next time I'm going to pack differently, because I learned so much.
And the other thing I did for years, because I've traveled a lot, is every time I got home, I wrote down everything I took that I didn't use.
So smart.
To that so that I wouldn't do it again. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
We have a couple people that are joining us. We just want to say hello to James Bartlett is joining us. James, oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed. Latoy. I can never say his name, but I know him and I've read his books. Yes. Yeah. And he's going to be like, not know you at BoucherCon because I mispronounced his name. And then 23 Micah says she's a writer too. And James said he loves Sid. So who doesn't at this point?
He's my husband, just so you know.
Sid? Wait, no.
No, James is my husband. So
James. There's 2 James on here.
Oh, James Bartlett.
Okay. I was like, wow, that's really like big news.
Jim Latoile is not my husband, but that's, that's just a tragedy.
No, yeah. So, last question: best travel essential and least, I guess, most ineffective travel. I'm never packing this again. Like, I love the list of things that you don't pack.
Most valuable travel thing.
Yeah. What's the best tip?
I would say. I know it sounds stupid, but I would say a silk turtleneck, black turtleneck, because you can rinse it out overnight and it goes with everything and it doesn't show stains and you can wear it under or over anything. So I think that's the one thing I always have, but the really thin ones. Yeah,
that's what I will be on the lookout for my next trip.
And something that is absolutely like, as much as Sid loves shoes, like I take 2 pairs of shoes max. Like that's it. You have to just pick the right shoes and buy some more when you're there or whatever. But shoes are heavy. So I'm very particular. I don't take heavy shoes.
No, I mean, and
I wear the heaviest pair on the plane.
Absolutely.
They take are light. So
makes perfect sense. I mean, the fact that Sid owns a travel agency, right, runs it efficiently and has laminated sheets for if I'm going someplace tropical, this is what I need. I'm not kidding you. My friend who I met on that trip, that's exactly what they have. They have like plastic storage, like Rubbermaid. Like this is the stuff if we go someplace warm, if we're going someplace cold, because they live in the Pacific Northwest, this is what we pack. I mean, it takes the stress out of everything right then and there. So very, very cool. This has been so much fun. So a huge thank you to all of us joining, all of you joining and watching and listening. I'm joined in a delightful conversation with Wendell Thomas Award winner. This is Cheap Trills, the latest in the Sid Redondo series. Thank you to our tech team, Mike, for making sure all went smoothly. Thank you to MaxFacts for making sure you have copies of Wendell's books and for people who are going to go back and binge read. And then a huge thank you to you, Wendell, for joining us this evening. I'm Jen.
For me.
Thank you. So I'm Jen Jumba with Writers Unplugged. Thank you so much and happy reading.